Hello. Hello. Welcome to our virtual audience today. This is a huge room for such an intimate conversation that we are wanting to have. Hello to our Uber team. Thanks for showing up here. Hello to our Chief Legal Officer, Tony West. No pressure for the speakers up here today at all. I have to say we were thankful that we got today's slot before the night out, because if you are presenting in the morning after the night out, I have been there, and namaste to you folks. Good luck tomorrow as you are coming. But seriously, we're thrilled to have you here with us today. We know that you have many options at Out and Equal, a lot of really great options. To have some really important and critical dialogue. And so we're thankful that you've decided to invest some time with us today. Before we started, though, I wanted to call out an elephant that is probably in the room right now. An elephant that is some of the questions that have been directed to us even at our booth as folks have come by and said, yeah, we want the free credit for Uber. But what is Uber doing here? Some of you may recognize and realize that with the LGBTQ community, there may be some mixed feelings around Uber. It may feel a little polarizing. Some of you maybe even have had some very personalized experiences with Uber that has let you down. So I want to be clear to begin with what this is going to be today and what this is not going to be today. We're not here today for a public PR campaign. We are not here today to spin stories, and we're not even here today to really defend ourselves in any way. What we hope to accomplish today is a very personal and a very authentic dialogue. We want to talk about our own personal experiences with Uber. And we also want to talk about a very public journey that Uber has had in regards to accountability along the way. What we're hoping is that our story can resonate with some of you. I'm hoping that even it will resonate with some of the companies that brought you here this week. And maybe even some of you have been in our shoes, and this is a dialogue that we can learn and kind of move forward together when you find yourself in this place of rebuilding trust. So to get us started, I want to do introductions. I'm Alex Eminette. I am one of our senior directors of diversity, equity, and inclusion at Uber. We would refer to myself at Uber as fairly Uberish. I'm only a year and a half in. I came a little bit further along in the journey. With me today is Indigo Avisov. Indy, we like to call them on our team, is one of our senior diversity, equity, and inclusion business partners. They self-identify as a queer, trans, non-binary employee in what we would refer to at Uber as an OG, one of our originals along our journey. And Indy was there during a lot of this monumental shift, and they're going to talk a little bit about how they were personally impacted with this journey. And last but not least, we have one of my favorites, Belinda Stevens. Belinda is also going to be leading us into the future. They are what we would refer to as an OG, a senior diversity, equity, and inclusion business partner. And she's going to be sharing her lens as an ally, as a Black woman, and some of the challenges that she has personally faced with her own identity and going on this journey with us. I've got to admit, I have a confession to make. I am a little bit nervous today. I'm feeling a little bit vulnerable right now, and I'm feeling vulnerable for me. I'm feeling vulnerable for my team. I'm feeling vulnerable for Uber in general. And I'm not nervous about public speaking, although I was joking with my ERG leaders earlier this week. It got introduced that I was turning 45 and I need my glasses a little bit more. I feel I've reached that in the gay community, at least the Golden Girls gay community status. So my memory isn't what it used to be. I'm not even nervous that Tony West is in the audience today. I'm not nervous about the content of the presentation, and I'm not nervous about my team's subject matter expertise. I'm nervous and I'm feeling vulnerable because it's another uncomfortable step forward for Uber in transparency and accountability. It's an ownership of some broken trust. It's a very public admission of guilt in many ways, and it is us being transparent around some of our past mistakes, some of our past failures. As a member of our LGBT community, I feel even a little bit more vulnerable because it's my community that we have let down. A community that is not only critical to every major intersection of my own identity, but it's the very community which made me pick up the baton in the first place to get into the DE&I space 13 years ago. I feel vulnerable because I'm here to represent a company that I love, that I sincerely love very, very much, a company that I believe in its purpose, a company that I believe in its leaders, a company that I believe in its people. And it's a company that is earnestly trying to own its own past so that we can reconcile, so that we can be in the present and we can build towards the future in this space. I feel vulnerable because I am an executive at this company who may have not been present for all of our past, but is pivotal in making change for who we are today and the dialogue we're having moving forward into the future. And maybe you can empathize with that feeling, or at least sympathize a little bit. Maybe many of you in your personal lives outside of work are street warriors. You are influencers. You are advocates. Maybe many of you in your downtime, and I'm assuming so since you are here, are out there hitting the streets as activists, working on political, social, legislative issues that not only involve our community, but broader human rights issues. And maybe you have taken that ambition, and maybe you have brought it into your professional careers. I am sure this audience is filled with a lot of ERG leaders, a lot of DE&I practitioners. I'm sure that several of you may be here to represent social impact with your companies. Maybe you drive inclusive communications or product equity design. Maybe you work on benefits and policies or HR. Maybe you are a business leader. Work with supplier diversity. Or maybe even you are an executive like me. Regardless of our roles, we all share a responsibility and an ownership of the companies that we work for and the companies that we're showing up at the summit for. All of us have a role to play in our culture and our overall brand. And so perhaps I want to take you on a quick little journey. You can relate and imagine what it means to wake up one morning and you find that the company that you represent, the company that you love, is in the headlines. And maybe those headlines look something like this: leadership misconduct, sexual harassment, racial allegations, community protest, pay equity issues, executive Twitter disasters, customer support hate speech, homophobic customer assaults, nude photos, uncovered discriminatory emails. I get lost in my place. Accessibility issues, technology hacks, DE&I lawsuits, unfair hiring practices, inappropriate DE&I marketing, controversial political affiliations, product and technology fails. What the fuck? Right? Seriously, what the fuck? At some point in your career, if you haven't already experienced this with your company, with your industry, maybe even with your own team or your own leaders, I promise you that the inevitable hard truth is that you eventually will. At some point in your careers, and if you do or when you do, You may have to ask, or will ask, some of these questions. Could I have prevented this? Was I aware? Why didn't we do anything about it? Did I miss something? Why weren't we paying attention over to this space or to this person? Perhaps your initial thoughts will be, how do we respond? Do we respond? Are the facts correct? Do we defend? Do we spend? Do we cover? Do we apologize? How transparent do we need to be? How transparent can we be? You will be put in a position to examine not only self, but you will be put in a position to examine workforce, impact on the marketplace, impact on your brand, on your existing culture, on the community, cities, countries in which we live, work, and serve. Outside of the human impact, since you work for a business, this is DE&I, this is culture in a corporation, you're going to be forced to need to examine the impacts on clients, on your customers, on your stakeholders, on your shareholders. You're going to have to ask questions around financial impacts, political impacts, workforce impacts. You may find yourself wagging the finger and saying, I told you so. I knew this was coming. Why didn't you listen to me? You may find yourself angry. You may find yourself frustrated, disappointed, ashamed. All of these feelings are valid, and all these feelings are what our colleagues and employees went through at Uber at separate times. These are questions that we had to ask ourselves. And so what we want to do today as part of ownership is share 3 case studies at different points in our journey from Uber. What those impacts meant to us and how we started to come out of that journey. Some of you may be familiar with the Showtime limited series that came out this year, Super Pumped. It was based on the perspective and the rise and outing of one of our original CEOs and founders, Travis Kalanick. And although there were things that were embellished a little bit in that show, there were also some truths that were portrayed. Most importantly, it included a lead-in to a whistleblowing essay in 2017 by a former Uber engineer, Susan Fowler. Some of you may remember that, which gave a very damning look into Uber's cultural problems. Some of those problems included sexual harassment, some of those problems including sexism, and other DE&I nightmares. Uber hired a law firm that year, Covington and Burlington, to do an external investigation on ourselves. And it was a pivotal moment in shaping who we are today. The Covington report held nothing back. It spotlighted every dark corner of the business, and a lot of the truths were undeniable. But it also gave us a light to move forward. And it offered us an opportunity to shine again. Events like these I like to call catalyst events. They spark an immediate corporate forest fire, where a lot is burned down in the moment, where curtains are pulled back, where sometimes bad behavior comes out of the woodwork. And events like these can be painful. They can be embarrassing, but they are also awakening, and they are critical in our steps towards growth because it gives us an opportunity, just like when a forest burns down, to bring new life in, to redesign, to reboot, to retell our story. Next, in 2020, all of us were impacted by Black Lives Matter. This was the largest global civil rights movement in our history, with over 40 countries that participated in protests globally. Black Lives Matter brought the long overdue spotlight to companies' lack of progress, support, and focus on addressing systemic racism. It demanded that we all play a more active role. And it changed the dialogue, and it changed the landscape of what D&I fluency means for businesses moving forward. An approach to systemic issues calling out, minimizing, and performative DE&I business cases and strategies is now the new norm. Finally, last case study up here, which is one that we're probably most familiar with, the most recent. Last year, the LA Times and other news channels picked up the story of around 12 trans earners for Uber who were blocked from being able to sign up as drivers, whose accounts were flagged as fraudulent, and this was a large part due to our technology build. It was in large part due to some of the risk and certification processes that was in place. And there was even a piece of our customer support that didn't have the right education, the right fluency to navigate these concerns. This one was a really hard one for us because it was much later on our journey after we had made progress, and it impacted a community that we were so trying to lean into and do the right thing for. It wasn't due to intent. It was a failure to have inclusive design in the tech. It was a failure for us to not have all of the right people in the room. And it was a failure for us to not follow up with that community and ensuring that it was working properly all along. I want to point out that all three of these case studies happened at different intersections within our journey. We have the pivotal explosion of a catalyst event. We have the storming phase of change that comes with systemic issues and cultural issues that may arise. And then finally, your company can face surprises and reminders that regardless of where you are on your journey, that our tech, our processes, our people can fail us. Humanitarian crises can pop up. They can demand attention or a spotlight or a community that we weren't necessarily looking on in the moment. But regardless of when these things happen, regardless of how strong or committed or progressive we think we are as a company, it still comes up as a failure. Still comes up as a mistake on our end to own, to fix, and to resolve and be accountable for. So the first question that we had to ask ourselves are, what were we willing to sacrifice? What are we willing to sacrifice for equity, for diversity, for justice, for inclusion, for belonging? And let me be clear, there's always going to be sacrifices. And if you're going to be in this space and you're going to fight for these things, you have to understand, from a business perspective, there will be sacrifices. It could be a sacrifice of talent and leadership that may be toxic, that may be harmful, that may be destructive to the culture that you are trying to bring and create in a new organization. It could be a sacrifice of finances or resources that it will take to invest to make true change. It could be a sacrifice of clients that don't or won't align with your company's values and where you are going into the future. It could be a sacrifice of shareholders, our stock values, because choosing the right or equitable thing isn't always the most popular. It could be a sacrifice of time that we have to make to be more thoughtful of deliberate decisions that we do in our hiring processes, in rolling out products or technology, in preparing content for training. It could be a sacrifice of dealing with bad press, in taking the hits, allowing narratives to happen until we have done the work to get our own house in order. Instead of skipping to quick and performative actions that are only going to be the blanket facade. And there is not a right one-size-fits-all answer here. Depending on your company, depending on the incident, depending on the culture or the community that was impacted, all of those sacrifices may flex, they may change, you may decide where those priorities exist. But it is a complicated dialogue and it is a complicated narrative. As we examine this, Uber decided which of these as we went through each of these case studies. 3 things that we were not willing to sacrifice. First and foremost was integrity. This is one of our core values and statements. We are going to do the right thing, period. Well, what does that right thing mean? Because the right thing can mean something different for so many people. But for us, it is the right thing that every truth has the right to be shared. Every voice has the right to be heard. We will not invalidate any employee, earner's, or user's experience. And it deserves the moment at the table to be heard and making sure that we are inclusive of that thought process. Secondly, when we talk about equity, good cannot be defined by us. And this is an important thing, not only for us, but for anybody that is here, that equity has to be decided by the communities that we are trying to help. We don't set the bar, you do. The communities we work with do. And finally, accountability. And I have to tell you something, I don't like that word for many, many reasons, because accountability, it comes from an extrinsic motivation. Accountability is we are doing something because we are told to do it. But accountability is also a crucial part of growth, and it has to be a starting point for any D&I or cultural journey, because we have to have measurements in place to track progress. We move to ownership in the next piece of our journey, as my coworkers will share with you. But at the end of the day, mistakes, contradictions to the work that we do, this is going to be a hard truth. These things will continue to pop up for us. And we have to own them, and we have to account for them, regardless of how minimal or how unintentional they may have been. Finally, before we kind of move into the present, I want to reemphasize that we can't be defined by our past as people, as communities, as business. We have the right to lean in to the valuable lessons that we learn from our past. In fact, our past can even be an indicator of right or wrong from us. Our past are an indicator of where we were and where we're going. And we recognize that as a company, both as individuals of this company as well as Uber as a whole, that it's going to take time, it has taken time, to rebuild trust. But we're also huge believers in, if we can't reconcile, then we can't move forward. And that's why we're here today, to help reconcile relationships, to heal, to grow, so that we can focus on where we are today and moving toward the future. So with that said, I'm going to have Indy come up, and they're going to take us to the present and where we are now and what accountability has looked like for us.
Thanks so much, Alex, for taking us down that road and that journey of ownership and reconciling with so much vulnerability and honesty. As I listen to you, I cannot help but reflect on my time here at Uber. I joined the company in the summer of 2016 because something deep down inside of me knew that my life would change as a result of being here, both professionally and personally. And I have to do this a lot, aren't I? No, we're good? Got it, good. Both professionally and personally, I knew my life would change. And let me tell you, it has. In 2017, I was faced with a decision, like many of my colleagues at the time who were shocked and horrified by what they were seeing in the headlines. My gut dropped and my heart sank. I had a decision to make. I could either take everything that I believe into my core and put it into my work here at Uber, or I could walk away and leave the problem to somebody else. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not one of those leave it to somebody else type of queer humans. I'm not sure if anyone else can relate to that in the audience. So I made this decision to lean in, and I watched the entire company do the same. We did the thing that most humans and organizations don't really want to do: lean fully into change. Change is a scary place, and a lot of things get unearthed in change. To disrupt historic patterns, we knew we had to enact serious and deep systemic change based on an honest and humbling appraisal of our past in order for us to forge the road ahead. While I agree that we cannot be defined by our past, I have to do that, there we go. While I agree we can't be defined by our past, we must use it to inform the choices that we make for the future. I'm standing here today super honored and super proud of the work we have done as a company in order for us to have accomplished what we have so far. We knew that our journey was going to be more of a marathon than a sprint. And I want to show you a little bit about what that looked like. As Alex mentioned, the Coventing Report in 2017 was a pivotal moment for Uber that helped us to not only redesign our leadership oversight and examine employee policies and practices, but completely reform the company culture inside and out. It allowed us to examine the reputation we had built externally as an aggressive partner in the transportation industry. The report laid the groundwork for making fundamental and foundational changes that reshaped and rebuilt Uber from the ground up. Transparency, both within Uber and externally, helped to ground the work we're trying to achieve and highlight where we could make improvements. Transparency to this day shines a light, a bright spot on all of our opportunities so that they are impossible to ignore and so that we can continuously hold the mirror up to keep ourselves accountable. Our employees have appreciated our rigorous approach to transparency as a company, as have our clients, our stakeholders, our shareholders, and the communities in which we operate. Within any catalytic event or DEI crisis management response, transparency not only has to be at the forefront of the strategy, but it has to be a continuous value that we uphold over the course of time. So you might be asking, what did we do to be transparent, and what do we continue to do? These are but a few examples. We started by evaluating and examining where we needed stronger leadership, and we replaced over 20 executives and senior leaders across the company. This included the hiring of our CDO, Bo-Young Lee, and the expansion of our DEI team, working deeply embedded across all regions. We began the work of strategizing a long-term DEI strategy, along with building and formulating executive growth and development plans. We then relaunched our annual externally facing people and culture report, where we reflect on the evolution of our workforce, our business, and the impact on the communities that we serve. This report is also an opportunity for us, year over year, to reflect on our own growth and where we can continue to raise the bar. We revamped the entire employee relations, HR, and DEI teams, and the way in which they operate and action on policy evaluation and the evolution of those policies, with an emphasis on restorative justice and building trust. I've personally seen a complete 360 as it relates to these teams and how they operate and action on policy and the evolution of that, and how they restore trust to our employee population. In the midst of all of this foundational work, we were also faced with responding to and inspecting how we as a company, our products, our workforce were showing up in the world in the midst of design flaws, product failures, and human, social, and cultural crises. Which brings us to 2020, the year I'm sure we will all always remember. We witnessed the unfolding of the first global pandemic of the information age with the outbreak of COVID-19. And as the world came to a screeching halt, we watched in horror the heinous murder of George Floyd, sparking protests and action in over 40 countries around the globe. Companies wanted to take a stand alongside their people and alongside the injustice that had for far too long gone overlooked. So Uber took a stand. And we approached it with the same rigor and transparency in which we approach everything else, uninterested in doing something to look good or to check a box. No performative actions, just deliberate execution on systemic changes. We asked ourselves this question: what does it mean to be an anti-racist company, and how can we globalize that message so that we can make actionable goals towards progress for all? We activated a paradigm shift, which required a mindset shift from an intellectual understanding of what inequity is to building a more fluent anti-racism lens into everything that we do inside and outside of Uber. Our commitment as a company to being an anti-racist organization internally and externally in the marketplace led us to making 17 public commitments and taking the bold stance of, if you tolerate racism, delete Uber. These are some of the examples of the output of that work that continues still to this day. Our Racial Equity Leadership Council meets regularly with our executive leadership team to infuse and embed many of these commitments into our DEI strategies across the business. We committed $10 million of funding to Black-owned businesses. We rolled out advancing anti-racism training to our employees, our riders, and our driver partners. We spent time identifying ways in which we can ensure equity internally by assessing pay equity and assessing equity in all of our hiring practices. We also committed $1 million to criminal justice reform. We believe that everyone has the right to move without fear, without discrimination, regardless of who you are. Which leads us to another and rather personal to me part of our story. As a DEI business partner who identifies as trans, non-binary, and queer, a design flaw in our product and a failure to our earners was deeply disappointing for me to watch unfold in the media. Being a person who has been misgendered and dead-named throughout the course of my own journey, I ached for the community of humans who are on the receiving end of the brunt and traumatic experience of what that feels like. On December 14th, 2021, I received an email with the details of the Los Angeles Times article, along with a request to help put together a team to help address what was detailed in that article. Uber, again unwilling to leave any stone unturned, put together one of the most comprehensive working groups I have had the privilege of being a part of. Folks from design, engineering, legal, marketing, driver support, community operations, DEI, HR, policy, comms, federal affairs, and our Pride ERG came together to examine every angle of this issue. Together, the group worked to identify what in the process went wrong and to mobilize a strategy to roll out corrective measures in the app experience along with our third-party anti-fraud checks. We sought to retroactively and proactively address any instances where this issue impacted an earner and work quickly to resolve these issues and ensure that moving forward, there was a fully trained white glove support team in place should these issues arise again. We can have good intentions about focusing on equitable opportunities while unwittingly missing design flaws that create inequitable experiences and challenges. This experience allowed us to learn and examine and evolve transparently all of the places in which our intent and our impact might be differing. It also allowed us to see the power of our diversity through such a broadly experienced and identified group of humans from across the entire business. As a result of that cross-functional group, we have taken many strides to ensure that things like this don't happen again. We partnered with the National Center for Transgender Equality to set up a fund to cover costs associated with making changes and updates to your state or federal IDs. We relaunched a fully specialized inclusive driver support team that offers 24/7 support and had them go through training in partnership with Hollaback. And we are currently set to launch a new onboarding process that a group of our trans earners will help us pilot in 2023. Finally, our inclusive product design team has created a framework to enable us to be proactive in holistically designing and building features that keep equity, inclusion, and safety at the forefront of every product feature that we launch moving forward. As I think about all of the work that we have done leading up to this moment, all the passion, the drive, the heartbreak, the willingness, the triumphs, and the relentless pursuit to get it right, I'm super proud of the dedication we have. I'm proud that we are more committed than ever to doing the right thing, period. We know that it's not always about making more commitments, but about being more deeply committed. Our values as a company stem from all that we have learned, but most importantly, all that we hope to continue becoming. These values aren't just our shared beliefs. They are the mindsets we embrace, they are the choices that we make, and they are the actions that we take. We have not always gotten it right, but we are not afraid of failure, because failure makes us stronger, it makes us wiser, and it makes us better. We know our pursuit of reimagination is never finished, it never stops, and it's always just beginning. Now to take you into our future, I'll pass it off to Belinda. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. Can you all hear me good? Pretty good? Good. Thank you so much for, let's move this over. There we go. Thank you all so much for making space for me today here at Out and Equal. As an LGBTQ ally, this is a really big deal for me. I find this moment special. I recognize the responsibility that I have here today to listen, to learn from you, to lean into your community. I take that with honor, pride. I will walk away from here today changed. I will walk away from here humbled, empowered to share your voices, to amplify your stories. So for that, I say thank you, and I'm ready to begin. Thank you to Alex and Indigo, my DEI partners, for sharing out Uber's journey, detailing where we've been. Our past has been kind of a little sketchy. Thank you. Thank you for being transparent about those things, where we've been, what we've learned. Frankly, we've learned a lot, and sharing the progress that we've made to date. As I sat here a few moments ago, I was listening, thinking like, oh, we've been on a journey, while simultaneously thinking and realizing, holy shit, we've been through some shit. So, in thinking about that, how many of you, by the show of your hands, can relate to being on a journey? Fair. How many of you have made mistakes on your journey? Let me raise both of mine. How many of you have revisited the same mistake and then may have learned from it? Okay, good. We're in good company. And most importantly, how many of you have been able to grow or are continually growing from those mistakes? I'm going to give yourselves a round of applause. In life, we find ourselves a part of many journeys. In business, in love, in relationship. I recognize that in our journey here at Uber, I've been able to be a part of not only being here for a few mistakes, watching us grow from a few mistakes. In summer of 2018, when I started sharing with my friends and family that I was joining Uber, immediately folks would say, Uber? Have you read the headlines? Are you watching the news? As a woman, as a Black woman, as a Latina, is it safe for you to join Uber? Why would you think that that's okay? And if I'm being honest, yeah, I kind of watched the news, but I was living in New Jersey, being a mom of a newborn, so I didn't actually think otherwise. I never considered that not joining Uber because of who I was actually an option. So if I'm being honest, my first few weeks at Uber were rough. I remember talking to Bo-Young Lee, our CDIO, saying, what the hell did I sign up for? Because just maybe the things that the folks asked me were true. There were little fires popping up everywhere. Though the fires were little, some were medium and big size, I could see the sparks of magic kinda in the smog. And it was at that moment I realized that once the dust settles, that the opportunity of a lifetime to help reimagine, rebuild, reestablish a company of the future for the better would maybe potentially be the greatest opportunity of my lifetime. So, because of those sparks of magic, I am very happy here to talk to you all about how we are owning our future, driving with purpose. Ownership means having a purpose. A wise woman named Oprah says, purpose is the thread that connects the dots to everything that you do. Here at Uber, our purpose is clear. We are a tech company that connects the physical and digital worlds that make movement happen at the tap of a button. Uber's mission to reimagine the way the world moves for better. Please take a moment to think about movement in its simplest and purest form. If you're like me, you recognize that movement is an absolute necessity in every part of our lives. Uber has transformed what all is possible through movement of humans, ideas, things. Movement can create access, increase equity, and movement has and can transform. In the evolution of movement, in the evolution of all things movement, we are constantly being asked, what's ahead? What is our responsibility? Where do we provide space, grace, and growth? And I'm going to talk about that. And what will we prioritize? Uber's responsibility as a part of owning where we've been, defining our purpose, let us acknowledge what our responsibilities for the future are. I'm going to share a few of them up here, and I'll highlight a part of that journey. So safety. Here at Uber, safety is our top priority, period. Our global security teams are available 24/7, 365. We have agents spanning across the entire globe. We are committed to help stop incidents on our platform before they happen by partnering with women's and LGBTQ communities, groups, and by partnering with and learning from LGBTQ and women's safety groups. In countries like Brazil, we offer psychological support for victims of LGBTQ phobia, racism, social impact. With partnerships with external institutes and NGOs, they have helped us create a more inclusive app. We have signed a zero emissions pledge by 2030 for our environmental impact, product equity, inclusive design. We have a dedicated team that is fully focused on taking into consideration all facets of people's identities and lived experiences, ensuring that everyone can have the same experience on our app with dignity. Extending our influence beyond just the movement, whether it's requiring users to acknowledge conduct guidelines, influencing partner organizations to diversify, or partnering with the UN, we are continually seeking opportunities to increase equity beyond the boundaries of our organization. Let's talk about how we're building an inclusive community within the walls of Uber. Folks are afraid to say the wrong thing in fear of the C word. And I'm not talking about that C word. I am talking about canceled. Right? We recognize we're living in a cancel culture society. Folks are avoiding having difficult and tough conversations to gain better understanding, and we get that. As a global team, as a global company, we see this every day. Because of that, our approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion accounts for space and grace. We recognize that everyone's starting their DEI journey in their own individual parts, right? Understanding and valuing that, we have very different lived experiences based on where we are, our identities. A trans employee in Brazil will have a completely different experience than a Korean American in San Francisco, or me, a Black Latina in New York. I could have a different experience in my same city as opposed to one of my white male colleagues. We appreciate that. Knowing that, we believe in meeting people where they are in their journey, without judgment, with support, with compassion. Helping our employees build their fluency and understanding of DE&I, assisting them on their journey by providing coaching and development with training, raising their own self-awareness, increasing their cross-cultural competency, giving them the tools to become an inclusive team member as well as an inclusive leader. We appreciate knowing that everyone is different, and that's why we have 12 ERGs that are fully committed to bringing and raising awareness for their respective communities. At Uber, we all belong. Let's face it, DEI work is not easy, and oftentimes we find ourselves navigating really tough situations. And because of that, we have to hold people accountable when they make mistakes. As a part of our commitment to always examine the way in which we do things through strong partnerships across our people team functions, we are constantly reviewing our policies and practices, strengthening our programming and tools. Our employee relations team, throughout the last several years, has developed programming to equip our employees with restorative practice skills to support a culture of open communication where feedback is welcomed and respected. So, what does the road look like ahead for us, and how are we prioritizing our future? As we expand our work on equity, we will not accept that broadening our focuses minimizes our commitments in other spaces, nor pit the needs of one group over another. LGBTQ, Black, African American, Latinx, women, people with disabilities, and all of our communities require our attention and focus. The success of DEI's future lies in being led through a more global lens. Taking a country-by-country approach to reach full equity, we are committed to meeting people where they are, no matter where they sit in the world. In order to design with, we must ensure that those with direct lived experiences are authentically represented, centered, and involved in the design process. That's how we shift unequal power dynamics. In year 4 of my Uber journey, I wholeheartedly believe, more than ever, joining Uber on their journey of mistakes, on their journey of learning, leaning in, and growing has been one of the most fulfilling experiences of my life. Activist, scholar, author, and badass human Angela Davis says, "I am no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I am changing the things I cannot accept." Here at Uber, we are unwilling to accept what has been. So please join us as we reimagine the way the world moves for better while redefining movement around the world for all. And thank you. I will pass it to Alex to close us out.
Thank you for allowing us to share our story with you. As part of ownership, we also wanted to create space for us to have a little bit of a dialogue. So we want to give this opportunity to ask questions, but also to comment, to react, to maybe share some of your own journeys. We do want to start online if there are any questions or thoughts or reactions first, and then we'll move to our broader audience.
Great. Hello, everyone. Rebecca York, they, them pronouns, Out and Equal staff. I'll be representing our virtual attendees. We've got one question that I think is a really interesting one. You just mentioned the restorative language skills to support a culture of open communication. What are these skills, and how are you seeing them put into practice on the day-to-day?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's a great question. So our restorative practice is a partnership between our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Department and our Employee Relations Group. And as Belinda and Indy kind of indicated, there are moments that we want to have more thoughtful dialogue instead of scorched earth approaches, allowing an opportunity for us to get things wrong, allowing an opportunity that we're going to start in different spaces and places. So our restorative practices is all around building fluency, and it has allowed a space to ask questions and get things wrong. It's allowing a space for subjective and not necessarily all objective facts, but saying, this is how I feel. This is where I may stumble. This is a challenge for me. And going in with the mindset that we're all there to improve. We're all there with the mindset to grow and to respect. Thank you for the question.
Alex, if I could just add something. As the DEI business partner that supports the ER team, I also just want to comment on the fact that our employee relations team has completely revamped their entire process through which they address employee concerns or things that come up over the course of time, with their center being on restorative justice and building trust. So everything in the framework that they're building to address anything that comes through employee relations is built with those things at the center. So I just wanted to add that.
I think we've got a question over here and then down here.
Hi, my name's Christina Kendrick, she, her pronouns. So I have to say that this is one of the most infuriating sessions I've ever been at Out and Equal. You guys are talking about stuff at the margins. You're talking about the LGBTQ stuff, the racial equity. Honestly, those are table stakes for any tech company, as you guys call yourself a tech company. But you haven't talked at all about social equity or building up the communities that Uber is in. You exploit your drivers. Many of them cannot make ends meet by using their platform. And you guys haven't been profitable since 2009. So it's not even obvious that your business model can support social equity. So I hope many others in this room have been thinking about the social equity piece and the intersectionality. We're at Out and Equal. This is not just about LGBTQ. Honestly, this has been a terrible session based on what you guys have focused on. It's all been whitewashing.
I appreciate the feedback, and I am going to hold true to where we started this conversation off with, is that we want every truth and every narrative to exist. I'm sorry that this experience and narrative has felt like that for you, and certainly not what we wanted you to experience through this process. I think it is fair to validate when we talk about social justice. We had a limited amount of time to really kind of talk about where we were starting from. Would love the opportunity to sit down with you more directly and talk deeper into the work that Uber is doing. And I know that we've got a huge team here that is willing to kind of fill in some of those gaps with you. So thank you.
Hey, can I jump in here?
Actions speak louder than words.
Can I jump?
We spend hundreds of millions of dollars keeping your independent contractors from becoming employees.
Hey, can I jump in here? I appreciate what you're saying. I'm Bo, by the way. I'm Uber's Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer. And first and foremost, I really do actually appreciate your passion and justice. And I'm not going to try to defend or deny or anything that you have to say, but I do want to share a couple of points and facts in terms of our earners. And I think what I'm hearing you say, distillation, is like, this is all good and well, the margins are fine, but like, what about the earner population? First and foremost, I don't want you to minimize the margins. The margins are actually incredibly important because it is the fact that society as a whole ignores the margins that we end up where we are with this inequality, right? Oh, LGBTQ people only make up like what, 3 to 5%, 10% at most? Like, there's a margin. We don't have to look at them, right? Asian Americans in the United States make up 7%. Oh, they're being killed and attacked because of COVID. We don't have to care about them. That's the margin. But when you add all the margins up, it becomes really, really large. So I don't want you to necessarily minimize the margins. In terms of the earner population, we know that there's more that we can do, and we are trying to do a lot more. But, we also know when we survey our earners, and we have 5 million earners on our platform, that 80 to 85% of them love that model that we currently give, right? And maybe for that margin of our earners who say, this model of independent contractor doesn't work for us, that we do care about them, that 15%. But let me give you a couple of statistics about our earner population. We did a study, I believe with the ILO several years ago in Mexico. And what we discovered is that up to 40% of earners signing up in Mexico signed up for their first social security number in Mexico when they signed up with us. And that's because these are people who have historically always had to work on the margins. They were the day laborers who would stand on the corner. Someone would come up and say, hey, come work at my house. I'll give you $10 or $50 for the day to work on my roof. They work on the roof for the day. At the end of the day, like, you did an okay job. Here's $20 instead of the $50. These are the people who became earners on our platform. And these are the people who entered legitimized work that required them to pay Social Security taxes for the very first time. We brought them into a body of work. In that same population of earners in Mexico, half of the people who signed up with us, they opened up their very first bank account because of the opportunities that earning on Uber's platform allowed. I travel all over the world, and I know that in every single market where we exist, our earner population is disproportionately made up of people who have always worked on the margins. I remember being in India in a focus group and talking to our earners there, and I asked them, how long do you think you want to earn? And they're like, as long as Uber's in the market, I'm earning on Uber's platform. And then I would ask, well, why? Why do you want to earn on a platform? Because they say, I see on that app, I see how much I made for the day, and then I look at my bank account, and that's the amount of money that shows up in my bank account. And that has never happened to me before. So I do appreciate your perspective, but I also want you to recognize it's a much more nuanced conversation. You're hearing one narrative in the media, and I'm not saying that the media is incorrect, because one of my mentors once said to me, you can hear 99.9% of like really good feedback, and you can hear like 1% negative feedback or critical feedback. And she said, always remember, Bo, always remember, run towards the critics, because that's where you'll learn. So your feedback, your perspective is deeply important to us, but I also want everybody in this room to appreciate it. It's a much more complex conversation than simply the earner, we're terrible to our earners and we haven't made a profit. And because that is what you're just saying, that is part of our history and we acknowledge it, but we are trying to do something better. We truly are trying to do something better. We have folks in this audience from our product equity team. We have folks in from our engineering equity team. We have folks from social impact. And so I truly appreciate the criticism. I don't want any of you to be like, oh, snap, just like they all hate her now. I don't want anybody thinking that, because we really appreciate it. But I also want you to know that there's a more complex conversation. And I also want you to know, as a senior executive in this organization, that your voice is so welcome.
That was a thoughtful reply.
I'm looking at the timing and I realize that we're almost out. I'm getting a nod from the Out and Equal staff. Just a reminder, in your bags, we do have cards. I know it's night out. There are credits, so we want you to be safe always. So use those credits for Uber tonight and have fun, and thank you again for joining us.